Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we continue following the story of James and Diep, a story that may seem simple on the surface, yet is filled with deep emotions, quiet worries, and understanding slowly nurtured after a turning point. In the previous episode, everything came to a close with a misunderstanding that forced Diep and James to face the greatest fear of their lives. The moment little Nee went missing plunged them into absolute panic, their hearts clenched tight as the worst possible thoughts flooded their minds. In that instant, they could no longer stay calm or think things through, there was only the terror of losing the most precious thing they had. Every passing minute felt endless, and every time they called Nee's name, it carried desperation and desperate hope. Then, the truth gradually came to light. There was no kidnapping, no plot, no danger as they had imagined in their panic. It was simply James's father, returning from a long business trip, who had taken little Nee out to play without informing anyone beforehand. An action born out of love and innocence, yet it unintentionally created a storm in the hearts of those left behind. That brief silence became the spark for anxiety, for frightening assumptions that Diep and James could not control. No crime had occurred. There was only silence, and the worry of people who loved Nee with all their hearts. When everything was finally clarified, a sense of relief spread through them, but it also left behind a deep pause. A pause filled with lingering unease and unspoken questions. Would everything have been different if there had been just one message, one small notice? In that silence, they slowly came to understand that love is not only about being together, but also about the responsibility to share and to speak to one another, even if it's just a small thing. As time passed, life gradually returned to its familiar rhythm. The weather began to turn colder, the temperature dropping day by day, bringing with it a chill that crept into every corner. In the cold of the early morning, James and Diep worked together in the yard. There were no grand words, no lingering tension from the previous ordeal, just two people quietly side by side, digging the ground and stacking stones to make a small place for the chickens to drink water. The steady sound of the hoe rose and fell, each stone placed carefully, as if every movement carried the patience and calm they were trying to preserve. James's hands were stained with soil, his breath visible in the cold air, while Diep bent down to pick up each stone and adjust it neatly. They didn't talk much, yet their coordination was effortless, like a habit formed after so many days of weathering storms together. Nearby, little Nee was kept warmly bundled. From time to time, she ran over, her curious eyes watching James and Diep at work, then she giggled and ran back to her spot. That clear, innocent laughter echoed across the quiet yard, dispelling the cold and the heavy remnants still lingering in the adults' hearts. Just seeing her safe and healthy was enough to ease every worry. The scene before them was peaceful and disarmingly simple. No more panic, no more suffocating moments of tension like those days before. All that remained was the chill of the season, the slow rhythm of work, and the warm presence of loved ones. In that moment, both James and Diep felt something deeply and clearly. After everything, what truly mattered was not avoiding every misunderstanding, but how they walked through those misunderstandings together, and, in doing so, learned to cherish the ordinary, quiet moments that they had once unknowingly taken for granted. While the two of them were still bent over working in the yard, amid the slow swings of the hoe and the dry clatter of stones hitting one another, Diep suddenly spoke up, softly calling James's name. Her voice was neither loud nor abrupt, just a gentle opening, as if she had been thinking about it for a long time and only now felt calm enough to say it. James stopped what he was doing and turned to look at her, listening with complete attention, no urging, no interruptions. Diep brought up what had happened the other day, when his father took little Nee out without telling anyone beforehand. As she recalled those memories, her gaze dimmed slightly. She admitted that in the moment when they couldn't find Nee, fear had truly overwhelmed her. It wasn't ordinary worry, but a deep, vague, yet heavy fear, as if just one more second of delay would lead to the worst possible outcome. At that time, there was no room for reason in her mind, only a rush of pressing questions and the terror that something beyond their control might have happened to the child. Diep said that in that moment, she couldn't think clearly or analyze right and wrong. All she knew was that her heart was racing, her hands and feet were trembling, and her mind was filled with images of little Nee, small and fragile, in a world full of risks. That fear felt too real, too close, making her almost forget everything else around her. But then, when the truth gradually became clear, when she saw with her own eyes that Nee was happily playing with James's father, an entirely different feeling emerged. Nee was smiling brightly, her eyes sparkling, her face radiant and free of fear. Hearing the child herself recount how she had spent a joyful day, going out, being cared for and loved, Diep slowly felt her heart ease. The frightening images in her mind faded away, replaced by relief mixed with a quiet sense of embarrassment for having imagined the worst. She admitted to James that she had always thought his father was a very strict, distant, even somewhat cold man. In her mind, he was someone of few words, someone who rarely showed emotion and always kept a certain distance from others. Yet through this incident, seeing firsthand how he played with Nee and devoted his time entirely to her, Diep realized something very different. Behind that stern exterior was a man who truly loved children, he just wasn't used to expressing it through words or gentle gestures. Diep made it clear that she didn't blame James's father. She understood that everything had come from love and an unintentional oversight. What she hoped for was simply that, if he ever took me out again, everyone could be informed beforehand, even just a brief message, so that no one would have to endure such anxiety and fear again. It wasn't a complaint, but a sincere wish, born out of love for the child and for the family. James listened carefully to every word Diep said. He didn't interrupt or try to justify anything. There was clear understanding in his eyes. He knew his father better than anyone, a strict man who lived by principles and rarely let his emotions show. But James also knew that beneath that hardness was a very soft heart, especially when it came to children. He had grown up under that strictness, and he understood best that his father's love was often hidden behind quiet actions. James told Diep that he hoped little Nee would be the one to gradually change his father, not to change who he was, but to help him learn how to express his care more openly. He also shared that he hoped one day his father would accept their relationship, not because of Nee, not because of any external reason, but because of Diep herself, for who she was and for everything she had done for this family. The conversation slowly came to an end in a silence that felt calm rather than heavy. They returned to their unfinished work, arranging the stones and adjusting the small water pit for the chickens. The topics that followed were simple and ordinary, raising a few more chickens, doing everything little by little, step by step, without rushing. There were no grand plans, just small intentions tied to everyday life. In that quiet calm, Diep realized that her heart felt much lighter. The knots inside her seemed to have loosened, not through grand promises, but through genuine listening and understanding. At the very least, after everything that had happened, she knew that James was always on her side, always willing to listen and share. And more importantly, she understood that his father was not the cold, unfeeling person she had once imagined, but someone who loved in his own way, quietly and discreetly. The afternoon slowly faded into evening. The last rays of sunlight grew pale and stretched across the front yard, covering everything in a calm, muted tone. The air seemed to settle after a long day, carrying a feeling that was both familiar and heavy in a way that was hard to name. Mr. Home quietly prepared his luggage for his next business trip. His movements were still neat and decisive, as always, yet within each gesture lingered a faint hesitation, as if he were not entirely ready to leave. Before getting into the car, he paused for a moment. His gaze turned toward Diep, who was standing nearby. His voice was low and slow, lacking the usual sternness and instead carrying a rare sense of calm. He thanked Diep for the simple yet thoughtful meal, for her dedication, and for the moments she had spent worrying about and caring for little Nee over the past few days. The words of thanks were neither long nor embellished, nor accompanied by any overt display of emotion, but they were enough to show that he had noticed and acknowledged what Diep had done, in his own way. Yet immediately after that, when he turned to his wife standing beside him, his voice dropped again, returning to its familiar severity. He gave a brief, dry instruction. "Tell James to limit his contact with Diep." The words were not spoken loudly, but they were sharp enough to make their meaning clear. They exposed a truth that everyone could sense, even if no one said it out loud. Mr. Hone had not fully accepted things yet. Despite moments of softening, despite the times he had shown care and closeness toward little Nee, the barriers in his heart were still there, deep-rooted and stubborn. These were prejudices formed over many years, principles built long ago, not easily shaken by a few incidents or fleeting emotions. His wife understood this very well. She did not argue, nor did she appear surprised or disappointed. But she was the one who saw most clearly the quiet conflict tearing at his heart. On one side were old prejudices, rigid frameworks, and principles he had always imposed on himself and his family. On the other side was the growing affection, silent but undeniably real, that he felt for little Nee. It was not expressed through words of love or tender gestures, but through glances from afar, discreet concern, and small actions that even he himself sometimes failed to notice. As the car began to move, pulling away from the gate, Mr. Hone instinctively looked back toward the yard behind him. Just a few hours earlier, little Nee had been running around there all morning, her laughter clear and carefree, as if the world had never known barriers or divisions. The image surfaced in his mind so vividly that it made him hesitate slightly, as though held back by something difficult to name. In his head echoed a small, familiar voice that had once caught him off guard. "Grandpa." That voice was not just a fleeting memory, it struck straight into the deepest part of his heart, a place he had kept sealed for many years. He let out a quiet sigh, soft but heavy with thoughts that could not be put into words. No one knew what he was thinking in that moment. No one could be certain which way those thoughts were leaning, toward reason or emotion, rigid principles, or a growing softness. Only one thing was clear, whether Mr. Hone wanted to admit it or not. It was little Nee, the child he had once regarded as an unworthy adopted grandchild, the one surrounded by so many invisible boundaries, who had silently begun to shake the strongest walls within a father's heart. Not through argument, resistance, or persuasion, but through innocence, through pure affection, and through a natural bond that could not be denied. Those walls had not collapsed all at once. They still stood there, firm from years of habit. But cracks had appeared, quietly and slowly, spreading in ways that even Mr. Hone himself could no longer fully control. And perhaps it was only a matter of time for him to face himself, for old prejudices to gradually give way to understanding, and for him to truly accept Diep and James, not because of circumstance, not because of any pressure, but because of what was quietly growing within his own heart. When sincere emotions have quietly taken root, growing little by little through very ordinary frictions, through misunderstandings that are slowly resolved, the question still hangs in that silent space: are the old prejudices, long entrenched, still strong enough to keep two people who are gradually drawing closer standing on opposite sides? Or will there come a time when the persistence of affection, patience, and sincerity will wear those barriers down until they finally crack on their own? Amid the unspoken words, the cautious glances, and the pauses that seem invisible, there remains a quiet weight. It is the weight of thoughts not yet confessed, of decisions not yet made, and of beliefs being tested day by day. Feelings may have begun, softly, genuinely, but the road ahead is still unclear, because love alone is not always enough to overcome everything. And then, alongside those prejudices, there is something else that makes the atmosphere even heavier. A secret Mr. Hone is still hiding. It is not spoken of, not mentioned, yet it is present in every pensive look, in every half-made decision, and in every hesitation whenever he stands before Diep and James. That secret is like a shadow, silently cast over every thought, making choices more difficult and preventing even budding emotions from being fully expressed. No one knows what that secret is. No one can be sure what it will bring when it is finally revealed. All that is certain is that as long as it exists, as long as it remains buried in silence, no relationship can truly feel light or free. And that very secret may become the final boundary between acceptance and rejection, between letting go of the past and continuing to cling to what is old. Everything now remains in a fragile state. Feelings have appeared, but they are not yet strong enough to erase everything. Prejudices have begun to waver, but they have not completely collapsed. The questions are still there, unanswered, waiting for the right moment to be resolved. Whose side will time stand on? Will love be strong enough to overcome these invisible barriers? And when that secret is finally revealed, which direction will everything turn? All of it still lies ahead. Stay tuned for the next episode.
Tạm biệt mọi người, mình quên mất luôn á.